Okay, so let's do some housekeeping. I know you guys are going to fight it out in the comments, and I'm not even going to try to stop you as I know I can't really do that. But let's get one thing established. Both Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas are amazing, wonderful games that still hold up today when you go back and replay them. This video isn't how one of them is overtly better than the other, but how one set the other up for even greater success in itself. If you still want to fight about it, the comments, however, again, I can't really stop you, but your opinion is wholly yours no matter how wrong it is. Thank you. To better help you understand the angle I'm going to be driving at here, let's do a quick history of Fallout up to this point. Shortly after Interplay dissolved the development studio known as Black Isle, which was responsible for Fallout 2 and whose head staff made the first Fallout game, they released a game called Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, to absolutely disastrous results. Interplay was already in some pretty dire straits as it was, and this wasn't helping anything, so Bethesda and ZeniMax swooped in and bought the property rights to the Fallout franchise off them and immediately got to work. The result was basically Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, but it had guns, also known as Fallout 3, and it was amazing and accessible to gamers everywhere, to the point that millions of gamers who were introduced to the Fallout franchise would have never been introduced to this wonderful franchise if not for the fact that Fallout 3 was not only accessible to people outside of the isometric strategy genre, but also a console-friendly game in general. That's how I discovered the Fallout franchise, and ironically enough, Oblivion and Elder Scrolls after that. I played the crap out of those games when I was younger. We all did. In fact, when it came time for Fallout New Vegas to come out, my parents did the smart thing and bought it for both the PC and our PlayStation because they knew my sister and I were going to fight over who got to play first. Smart move, Mom and Dad. You really knew your stuff. Meanwhile, while Fallout 3 was collecting Game of the Year awards like it wasn't a big deal and pumping out mostly good DLCs, I will always hate you, Mothership Zeta. The members of Black Isle Studio had reformed into Obsidian Entertainment and were doing pretty okay for themselves. They came out with KOTOR 2, which was widely received as an amazing sequel to the original Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. They did okay with their own intellectual properties, but there was still a void in their life. But then, Bethesda rolled up to them and say, "Hey, sucks what happened between you and Interplay. Here's the Gamebryo engine. Want to make another Fallout game?" And the rest is history. Fallout New Vegas is an amazing game that basically relies on everything Fallout 3 took a huge leap of faith on in order to be a successful game. When we remember that Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas are an entirely different genre from Fallout 1 and 2, it really becomes important how much of a leap of faith Fallout 3 took on a bunch of things, and how, well, yes, Fallout New Vegas is pretty much improving upon everything that was made in Fallout 3, they got Bethesda to do all the heavy lifting for them, and both games benefit from that. Fallout New Vegas is basically an expandalone to Fallout 3, albeit a very big, well-put-together expandalone. New Vegas is similar to games like Far Cry, Blood Dragon, or that new Subnautica game where you're basically in the Arctic now. It's an expansion to the previous game that takes the elements of the first game and morphs them into something improved, but does not add anything entirely new or radically improve on the graphics or engine. New Vegas uses the same iteration of Gamebryo as Fallout 3 does, down to the UI design. A large number of the weapons are recycled over from Fallout 3 down to the textures. However, it also features an entirely new game map, new weapons on top of the already existing ones from the previous game, new factions, and new sets of armors to go with them, but in spite of all of this, it is still the same core game underneath. Heck, if you go into your NVIDIA GeForce experience, Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas use some of the same images as each other for its game optimization. No, really, the Fallout 3 GameWorks thing uses a lot of screenshots from New Vegas. They have the Hoover Dam in the screenshots for Fallout 3's game optimization. There is a lot of new stuff in New Vegas, but when you strip it down, it's basically Fallout 3. It reminds me a lot of a Firaxis Games expansion pack, which for those of you that don't play Firaxis games, like say the XCOM reboots or Civilization, a typical Firaxis Games expansion pack will often have the original game be one thing, but the expansion is so comprehensive that it completely reworks how the game is. Amazing examples of this: XCOM 2 versus XCOM 2 War of the Chosen. War of the Chosen costs 2/3 of what XCOM 2 base game cost, but it reworks the entire game, and it's an entirely different executable to the point of where your mods for XCOM 2 will not work for XCOM 2 War of the Chosen. It's that intense. Like, I know, like, there's some pretty big expansions, like, say, what Frozen Throne was to Warcraft 3, but Firaxis really takes it up to 11. Where were we? This is a Fallout video, right? And much like the Firaxis game expansions, the core premise of the game is still effectively the same. You're a self-insert character that's sort of shoved out into the wilderness of the nuclear wasteland, and you have to find your way towards MacGuffin in order to become a player in the huge battle of the region where everything will be decided. Wait, this is also the core premise of Skyrim and Oblivion and Bethesda? Why? You know what? Whatever. Let's move on. The best way to boil this all down is that New Vegas is much more than an expansion, but much less than a full-on sequel. Yes, expandalone games are usually a bit cheaper than the games they're based on, and that is often conflated with them being lesser to their games they're based on. But New Vegas is a special circumstance here because Obsidian Entertainment went the extra mile and then the extra mile after that, and so on. New Vegas takes everything from Fallout 3 and expands on it until it becomes its own standalone game. Another common staple in expandalones is how they stay out of the way of the story of the mainline games, which helps all parties involved here. Obsidian gets to pick up where they left off with the NCR on the west coast of the Atomic Wasteland, whereas Bethesda gets to make their own continuity on the East Coast without pissing off any of the hardcore fans from the original games. Everyone is pleased and nobody gets kicked out of the canon or gets accused of ruining the pre-existing canon. Fallout New Vegas improves on nearly every aspect of Fallout 3. Obsidian already had all the heavy lifting done by Bethesda for making the Fallout 3 game base, so they got to just improve everything in this game. A good way to describe all the improvements made in Fallout New Vegas compared to Fallout 3 is anytime you were playing Fallout 3 and said to yourself, man, I really wish Fallout 3 had blank, New Vegas likely has that in the game. We can go down the line of all the things in Fallout New Vegas and see that they are overt improvements from Fallout 3. Are you annoyed that you only get this weak zoom when you're trying to shoot, and you only get an actual zoom if the weapon has a predetermined scope on it? Well, now in New Vegas, you can zoom on all your weapons by aiming down sight so you can have an idea of what the heck you're shooting at right now. Do you wonder how everything is centered around getting clean water, yet all you ever need to do to survive is to just inject stim packs into your arm until you explode? Well, Fallout has an actual survival system now in it with a hardcore mode. And even when you're playing normally, there's an actual survival skill that you can do things with, like say, make more bullets for your guns, make home remedies, and cook, and do all sorts of science stuff. You can make your own chems. There is an actual survival aspect to the game now instead of just click on the stim pack item repeatedly to bring yourself back from the brink. Ever wonder why the nice things you do in Megaton had an effect on what happened in Rivet City and how they treated you? Well, it's probably Free Dog's radio show, if we're being honest. But now there's a localized reputation system where things you do with a certain faction will directly affect how that faction treats you. And factions have rivaling interests. Be nice to Goodsprings, piss off the Powder Gangers. Hate the Legion, become friends with the NCR. Now there's not only just a karma system, but you also have an actual reputation in various towns. Fox the Friendly Super Mutant might just be the coolest companion ever between his Gatling laser that's a fire hose of death, combined with shouting Zen Buddhist proverbs as you rampage across the wasteland purging all that is evil, but don't you wish you could find out more about his story? Well, now in New Vegas, all the companions have their own side quest line where you can learn about them, form relationships with them, become their best friend, sort out all their emotional baggage. You can do it all. And these are just a few of the examples of things that have been rapidly improved in New Vegas and allow you to enjoy the Fallout game even more. Another place where New Vegas really shines is by taking a balance pass at all the previously existing weapons and combat system. A big problem in Fallout 3 is that towards the end of the game, you're going to end up only using a small handful of weapons because how certain enemies just scale up was level like in Oblivion. I have no idea why in Point Lookout enemies can take out half of my HP in one shot despite the fact that I'm level 28. But if I steal their weapons, bring them to full repair, and then try to hit them back with those weapons, I barely register on their damage bar. New Vegas manages to fix this by adding stopgap weapons such as a 9mm pistol and a 22mm pistol, or no, it's 22 caliber. Excuse me about that, that was bad. But as I was saying, there's not only stopgap weapons, but now you can modify and improve your weapons to allow for more life out of these things even after you're out of the areas where you will commonly find them. Thanks to modding improvements, you can use the varmint rifle much later in the game than initially intended by making it be a sort of stealth assassination type weapon for low damage threshold enemies. Which brings us to the next thing that Fallout New Vegas does to improve the general combat. Armor now has damage thresholds. Certain enemies will just glance off shotgun attacks despite the fact that even with a perk that allows you to do more damage with shotguns, there's still a threshold. Certain guns just aren't going to hurt certain enemies and you're going to need to bring something bigger. That being said, certain end level enemies that do have a lot of high HP and a lot of damage don't have that much armor, so other things will hurt them that normally wouldn't hurt other enemies. And now, because that also applies to you, power armor means something beyond just a straight stat boost. And to top it all off, now there are areas where dangerous enemies hang out instead of just having it like Fallout 3 where everything scales with the player level, so you can be wandering around Megaton's vicinity and suddenly an albino giant rad scorpion shows up. In Fallout New Vegas, you just know, okay, don't hang around certain mountain ranges unless you want to become Cazador Dinner. Another place where Fallout New Vegas really benefits from all the heavy lifting done by Fallout 3 is in the central story and the world building in the Mojave Wasteland. While Fallout 3 certainly has some stuff going on in it, like occasionally seeing some Brotherhood outcasts just wandering around and a few random encounters, Fallout New Vegas feels a lot more like it's a living world where things are happening even when the player isn't around. While you could ignore the main story in Fallout 3, eventually you're going to get corralled to Rivet City because you run out of things to do and you'll get back to the main story quest. Whereas in Fallout New Vegas, it's completely viable to completely ignore the main plot when you finally get dug out of the Good Springs graveyard and just go see what happens on the strip. Hey, you might run into Benny, you might not. You don't actually have to follow They Went That-A-Way if you don't want to. You could go try to make an Enclave reunion for all you care. We don't need to focus on the Hoover Dam. It also helps New Vegas' case that it's a living, breathing world, much more so than Fallout 3, and that the towns are much more fleshed out, and you're going to be remembering places like Novak and Prim a lot more than you're going to be remembering places like Megaton or Girder Shade, because towns in New Vegas are often a lot more than just a couple people, maybe a corrugated steel shack or two, and one quest. Most areas in Fallout New Vegas have several fully fleshed out quest lines for you to go explore, as opposed to maybe just the single one in Fallout 3. There are times, however, when this backfires and it kind of feels like the world is just a bunch of disjointed incidents as opposed to one single threaded area. However, that's always remedied by just going back to the main quest line and realizing that, oh yeah, this does all eventually fold into what happens at Hoover Dam. Even if you can just basically have everybody side with different people if you really wanted to. It's great. Everything I just mentioned that New Vegas improves upon from Fallout 3 wouldn't have happened if Fallout 3 did all that experimental gameplay compared to the previous games and laid all the groundwork for New Vegas to be great. Bethesda took in a thoroughly soiled franchise that was originally from a genre that was dying out and most recently a complete disaster at that point in time, completely reworked it, and turned it into a smash hit again, renewing interest in the franchise. Bethesda took what they had just made with Oblivion and reworked it into an entirely different kind of RPG from Elder Scrolls. And by nod, it worked. Fallout 3 set everything up for New Vegas to succeed, and without the rise of Fallout 3 in popularity, New Vegas probably wouldn't have existed in the first place. Yes, Obsidian hit the ground running with KOTOR 2, but as time would tell, they were having trouble working on their own IPs and really could use a boost. And that's exactly what they got with Fallout 3, and then getting the offer from Bethesda to go work on their old game series again. By using all the core elements of Fallout 3, and instead of trying to do their own thing or rehash old ideas, which may or may not have been the best choice, the Fallout franchise got a new lease on life. Pine over Van Buren all you want, but there's something to be said about how, by the time it would have came out, say maybe 2005 or 2006, given that in 2003 it was still in the tech demo stage, it would have been extremely dated compared to other RPGs in the time, and it'd be competing with the likes of Oblivion and Mass Effect. Van Buren would have likely been critically panned because it just stuck to the old ways and still tried to cling to a style of gameplay that kind of petered out in the late 90s. It's similar to how, well, yeah, it would be really cool to think about what would have happened with XCOM Genesis. It is basically just trying to apply a 3D format to something that worked in 2D isometric and not really adding anything new to it. Bethesda also did a pretty bro move at the time and decided that even though they were going to take over this franchise, they put it on the East Coast, far away from anything that had happened in previous Fallout games. They worked on their own story, kinda sorta from scratch, but still featuring major pillars of the Fallout canon, and then inviting Obsidian Entertainment to pick up where they left off on the west coast of the Fallout universe, and effectively allowing Fallout New Vegas to be a kinda sorta Fallout 3 for the West Coast Wasteland continuity. They didn't have to do that. They could have just tried to make their own continuity on the West Coast for the actual Fallout 3 and written over anything that Black Isle, or now Obsidian, would have had planned. But now everyone gets to stay in the canon as mentioned previously. Everything here comes full circle too, thanks to all the improvements made in Fallout New Vegas, because Fallout 4 got a big boost from all the things that were made in New Vegas. And if we go down the line of things in the Fallout 4 main game, we can see that a lot of the ideas in New Vegas got carried over. For instance, aiming down sights, modular weapons, enhanced item crafting for making stuff like drugs and steaks, companions who have actual character writing and quest lines assigned to them, a localized reputation system, although it's not so overt as compared to New Vegas, and multiple factions that are all tied into the main overarching plot of the game, which you can choose to side with, as opposed to just, hey, hang out with these guys whether you're good or evil and get to the end of the game. Fallout 4 combines the best elements of Fallout 3 and New Vegas to give us a worthy successor to the Fallout franchise and establish it as a franchise that's here to stay. Shame about current events, really. Fallout 4 is by no means perfect, and even a step backwards in a few areas, like the skill checks are non-existent, leveling is now kind of weird, and base weapons you can modify. Even with all the modification variants, there still aren't as many weapons as there were in previous games. And yeah, while settlement building can be fun, it also is a huge time waster sometimes because you're gonna need to figure out how to make an intricate network of trade routes that all go everywhere except for your Red Rocket station, and then just have one guy going back and forth for Red Rocket so that you can craft without being disturbed by raiders attacking your base. It's whatever though, it's still better than 76, so we can play forward in the meantime when we wait for Fallout 5. If there's anything I'd like you to take away from this video, it's that both Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas are great games that built off one another's success, and it shouldn't be seen so much as a question of which one is better, but more about how these two games came together and eventually made something better than the both of them. There's no point in squabbling over these games or which one may or may not be better, because they're both good and both should be enjoyed. I'm holding out for Bethesda to finally get it together with Fallout 76, maybe in 2 years, a la No Man's Sky. And like I said in the Brotherhood of Steel video, it sounds like a great core concept to have a AAA experience for something like Rust, but it's just extremely poorly executed. However, unlike Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, this is still redeemable. I'm just gonna have to sit and wait for them to figure out how they're gonna redeem it. Right now, the best we can do is know that Fallout 5 is going to come eventually, and that Bethesda knows a lot better than to try and clown around with a mainline installment of one of their biggest franchises. We don't have to worry about a World of Warcraft type situation, because even with Elder Scrolls Online, we're still getting Elder Scrolls 6, and Fallout 76 this is not going to be a game that has much staying power by the way this is going, so they're probably working on it right now. So for now, just mod Fallout 4 to high heaven to pass the time, or maybe New Vegas or 3, whatever you want. Thank you all so much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one. Which actually, if everything goes to plan, the next video is already uploaded. At the time of recording this and publishing this, Merry Christmas, you get 3 videos today.
Can I scratch? No scratch? Can I shake? This pleases me. I cannot scratch. pet? Can I pet? No, I can't pet. Hey, if I can't pet, you can't nibble. Oh, look at that. I can't even light it up right.
Yeah, these are those mountain lion rattlesnake hide.
Eat this!
Beautiful.
I know, it's like